This Sunday, we are back in our full fall routine. We have had a wonderful summer of lakeshore services. Last week, we had a terrific time in the courtyard with worship and then a fellowship lunch following and evensong in the afternoon. Now this Sunday, we are back to our regular routine with 8 o'clock Rite One service and 10:30 service in the Cathedral Church where we are all together. We'll also have our skip church for children during the first part of the service and the cookie hour afterwards. So we are truly back to our routine. And it's appropriate that this Sunday, the lectionary talks about coming back together. And in fact, the epistle ends with these very comforting words, draw near to God, and God will be close to you. This idea of connection, community, those things that we value so much here at St. John's. You'll hear that theme echoed again in the gospel, where Jesus is responding to some of the apostles and their desire to figure out kind of a pecking order among the apostles, who the greatest among them are. And Jesus brings a child into the midst and says, unless you have a faith like a child, unless you have that simplicity and honesty, that is the way to achieve greatness. So you'll hear all of those ideas of a childlike simplicity as we come together and unite ourselves as a community. You'll find those all through the service. In the communion, the choir will be singing a piece by John Tavener, who is a 20th, early 21st century mystical kind of composer, British, but very influenced by Eastern religion. And his works have been very popular over the past 50 years or so. He set the words of William Blake's poem, The Lamb, Little Lamb, Who Made Thee? And it's this, as you're probably familiar with this poem, it's a poem that we kind of all read in high school. It juxtaposes the idea of Christ being called a lamb, the Lamb of God, as well as being a child. And again, having that childlike simplicity. And what Tavener does is he takes a very strange, quirky kind of a melody and he works it through a couple of different variations. So that essential melody, as the full choir comes in, he sets it sort of like a palindrome where it goes in one way and then it unfolds in reverse order. And then ending with this hauntingly beautiful phrase. At the offertory, the choir will also be singing a piece by Richard Shepherd called The Secret of Christ. And it uses some words from Revelation as well as from Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, again, talking about that idea of being on pilgrimage and having that sort of innocence and faith as we pursue those spiritual goals. Also at the communion, in addition to that setting of William Blake's The Lamb, we will all sing together a hymn, O Master, Let Me Walk With Thee. Again, that idea of discipleship, of following Christ. And one of the two settings in our hymnal that we have is by the New York-based composer, Calvin Hampton. Calvin Hampton was really working in the late 70s and early 1980s, and a lot of his music sounds very much of that era. This sort of sounds a little bit like if Billy Joel had ever decided to write a hymn tune. And it's a terrific way to sing this text in a very contemporary feel and yet a very expressive sort of a melody. And of course, we have other really familiar and wonderful tunes that we'll be singing. We'll be singing Slain, one of this congregation's favorites, Be Thou My Vision. We have lots of great ways for you to follow in the footsteps of Christ with us here together at St. John's.